Okay, so let's jump right in. We're looking at this idea today based on some really compelling material you shared, stuff from a veterans mental health initiative.
That's right. Specifically material for their day 9. And yeah, this central metaphor just really stands out, doesn't it? This concept of emotional armor.
It really does. It leaps right out. So for this deep dive, let's unpack what these sources say about, why it gets built in the first place, especially in these high stakes situations,
Hmm.
what it looks like when, maybe, the situation changes, and crucially, how the sources suggest it can be, well, safely put down.
Exactly. It's kind of understanding this survival tool that might have been absolutely vital, but then can become a barrier later on.
Yeah, like making that switch from military life back to civilian life, which the sources touch on quite a bit.
Precisely. Something that literally saved you can suddenly feel like it's trapping you.
Okay, so let's start there. Why build it? What's the origin story, according to this material?
Well, the sources are very direct. They say it starts, the moment you put on the uniform. It's something drilled in. Basic training, deployments, right up to the forward operating base.
And they mention a specific kind of mantra, a code almost.
Yeah, they quote it directly and you feel it. Armor up, show no weakness, stay in control, hold, together.
Wow. Just hearing that, it sounds intense, an absolute command.
It is. And the sources stress, this isn't just talk. It's a creed that's vital because, well, it keeps you alive in those zones. When the stakes are highest, control suppressing fear. That's mission critical.
Makes total sense. It's a functional tool forged for extreme pressure.
It's pure survival mechanism. You
Yeah.
learn to lock it down, project strength, because people's lives depend on it, yours included.
But then,
Right.
this is where the sources describe that really difficult turn, right? What happens when the mission ends, when you're home?
That's the crux of it. The armor that was life-saving. Suddenly it starts feeling like, well, like a cage. They talk about it showing up at home, the dinner table, trying to connect with friends.
A cage. From protection to prison.
That's stark. Why does it feel like that?
Because, as the sources put it, underneath that steel, you're still carrying everything you couldn't show. The fear you swallowed, the grief, maybe even shame, those whispers of not good enough.
So it's all still there, just locked away.
Exactly. And beneath it all, there's this deep human need. Sources call it an aching need to feel human again, to breathe without that constant internal pressure.
Yeah.
They use this image of seeing good men walking around in full battle rattle, emotionally speaking, even years later.
Full battle rattle emotionally.
Yeah.
That paints such a clear picture, this disconnect between the outside world and the internal reality.
It really does.
Yeah.
And importantly, the sources are quick to say, look, this isn't a character flaw. It's not weakness.
Right.
It's a survival tactic. It got you through the suck.
So no blame for building it. It was necessary.
Exactly. The issue, they say, arises when you never take it off. When it sticks, becomes permanent, even when the environment's totally changed. And that's when the tool starts working against you. How? What does it block, according to the material?
Okay, they list a few key things. First, it blocks deep connection. Hard to get close to someone who's walled off, right?
Makes sense. Vulnerability is kind of the opposite of armor.
Right. Second, it masks what's really going on. The automatic I'm fine when you're absolutely not. The armor hides the truth.
And hiding that leads to feeling alone, I imagine.
That's the third point. It fuels crushing isolation. Keeping everyone out means carrying it all yourself.
And if what you're carrying includes wounds...
Then healing gets put on hold. The sources say the wounds are still there, just under steel.
Yeah.
They can't heal if they're covered up like that.
And just maintaining that front, that must take energy.
A ton of energy, jacks up your stress. Holding all that in constantly takes a physical and mental toll. Exhausting.
So the armor isn't actually stopping the pain. That's a key takeaway here.
No, absolutely not. They state it very clearly. The armor doesn't actually stop the pain. It just stops you from being able to heal from it. It contains it, locks it in, prevents healing.
That's the paradox, isn't it? Built to protect, but ends up hindering recovery.
So for someone listening, maybe seeing this in themselves, what does this armor look like day to day? What are the signs?
The sources give some really concrete examples. That quick, almost automatic, I'm fine, when someone asks what's wrong. Even when it's obvious you're not.
The standard deflection.
Yeah. Also, zoning out behaviors, maybe with a bottle, hours of TV, or just burying yourself in work. Anything to numb out or avoid feeling.
Using distraction as a shield.
Uh-huh. Or maybe it's that sudden flash of anger that pushes family away when they try to get close or offer help.
A defensive reaction.
Right.
Keep people at arm's length.
Right, or just completely shutting down if a conversation starts to get too real, too emotional, hitting the internal eject button.
So the vulnerability itself feels like a threat. Exactly. And just generally avoiding any hint of vulnerability, even with people you deeply trust, people you'd do anything for. Because vulnerability felt dangerous back then.
So essential in the war zone.
But back home, they say, it can turn your home into a prison. The place you should feel safest becomes another place you feel trapped.
Wow. Okay, so that brings us to the crucial part, getting it off safely. Because just thinking about removing that protection, it sounds, frankly, terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. And the sources acknowledge that. They say, we get it. This is not about just ripping it off all at once. That wouldn't work.
Doesn't sound like it. So what's the approach they suggest?
It's about learning how to loosen the buckles, one at a time, in a place where you know you're safe. Gradual, intentional, supported.
Loosen the buckles. I like that imagery. Okay, how? What helps with that process, according to this material?
They mentioned a few pathways. One is structured support, like reboot recovery trauma programs. The idea is being in a room with other vets who understand. That brotherhood, that shared experience.
A safe space to talk.
Exactly. To talk about the wounds, the feelings, and really be heard without an ounce of judgment. They mentioned a 12-week format, suggesting that structure helps.
Community and a safe container. Got it. What else?
Mental health coaching is another. This sounds more focused on getting practical tools. Learning to express feelings constructively, like with strength. Setting boundaries with love.
Skills for civilian life interactions.
Right. And shifting from being reactive, which is the armor's mode, to being that grounded leader, again, but in your relationships, in your own inner life.
Makes sense. Tools instead of just walls.
Yeah. They also bring up things like somatic breathwork and emotional release. This tackles the idea that the armor gets physically locked in your body.
How so?
Like that clenched jaw, tight shoulders, always being on, hypervigilant. These practices help release years of that suppressed tension and emotion that the body's been holding.
So addressing the physical side of carrying that weight.
Exactly. The body keeps the score, right? And finally, they mentioned faith-based strength. For people with faith, it can be an anchor. Connecting with that can help reframe vulnerability. Not as weakness, like the armor tells you, but as the path to true strength, courage, and clarity. Maybe through God's grace, as they put it.
So different avenues depending on the person, but all aimed at safely loosening things up.
Precisely. It's not about forcing it, but finding safe ways to start the process.
Which leads to how these sources talk about redefining strength itself. Because the armor strength is about hiding, right? Never showing weakness.
Right, and they flip that completely. True strength, they say, isn't hiding. It's being seen for who you truly are, scars and all.
Being seen, the total opposite of being armored.
It is. Strength comes from being known. And that takes real courage. They talk about having the guts to finally say, man, I'm struggling, and still standing tall.
That's a different kind of courage, isn't it? Maybe harder in some ways.
The sources suggest it's a higher form, yeah. And they offer encouragement. You don't have to do it all at once. Maybe just loosen one buckle. Or just let yourself breathe for a minute. Small steps.
Manageable steps. That feels important.
Yes. And the core message is powerful. Laying down your emotional armor isn't giving up your strength. It's how you finally reclaim it.
Reclaiming authentic strength by daring to be seen. That really reframes the whole thing.
It does. And it's interesting, they briefly mentioned the next topic in their program is exercise, reconnecting with the body, how that can help clear the fog and support this release.
Yeah, tying the physical and emotional back together again. The body holds it, the body can help release it.
A really key link.
Okay. So wrapping this deep dive up, we've gone from understanding why this emotional armor is built out of sheer necessity to seeing how it can become this cage later on, blocking connection, stopping healing. And we've looked at the pathways these sources suggest for carefully, safely starting to loosen those buckles.
Yeah, finding strength not in hiding, but in being known. Through community, tools, bodywork, faith, whatever resonates. Moving from just surviving to maybe actually living.
Feels like the heart of it, understanding that whole arc. And it leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? If the armor was built for the external battlefield, what's the internal battle that keeps raging when it stays on? And what kind of strength does that quiet inner war demand?
That's a powerful question to sit with. What does that inner navigation truly require?